Hello, everyone. Welcome back again. Welcome to today's session. Today we'll be talking about the chapter Human Reproduction. We'll discuss the theory related to this chapter. Okay. So, we'll be discussing the theory keeping in mind the NEET exam. So, we'll focus on the NEET exam. Okay, I will tell you some of the topics which are very important for the NEET exam, from which topics the questions come in the NEET exam. So before starting this lecture, I just want to give you one information that the images, text and other materials used in the presentations are for education purposes only. We respect the intellectual property rights of the original creators and owners. If you are the owner and have any concerns or issues, please contact us at sathee@itk.ac.in and we shall remove the content immediately. Please note that parts of the content may have been generated using generative AI, which is experimental. So what are the objectives of today's session? We'll talk about the menstrual cycle. Within menstrual cycle, we'll talk about the hormonal regulation of the menstrual cycle. So menstrual cycle, it is regulated by the hormones. So these hormones are released by the ovaries. Okay. Some of the hormones, they are released by the pituitary. And there is one hormone which is released from the hypothalamus. So we'll talk about these hormones. We'll talk about the functions of these hormones. Then we'll talk about the phases of the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle can be divided into different phases, or you can say stages. Then we will identify the ovarian and the uterine events. Okay, so within these ovarian events, we'll talk about the development of the follicles and the hormones which are released by the ovaries. Then we'll talk about the uterine events. And within this, we'll be talking about the endometrium, which is the innermost layer of the uterine wall. So what are the changes that occurs in the endometrium? We'll talk about this also. Then we'll talk about the roles of FSH, LH, estrogen, and the progesterone. So these are the hormones. Now, FSH and LH is follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Then we'll talk about the role of estrogen and progesterone as well. Then we'll talk about the topic fertilization. So fertilization, fusion of the male and the female gamete. We'll talk about the components of the mature oocyte here. We'll talk about the sperm and egg interaction, how the sperm and egg interact with each other, and how does the fusion of the male and the female gamete occurs. We'll talk about the implantation. So what happens? Zygote undergoes mitotic divisions, repeated mitotic divisions, and this is known as the cleavage. So we'll talk about the cleavage and its significance. Then we'll talk about some of the major stages of the embryonic development. Then we will understand the blastocyst formation, how the blastocyst is formed from the zygote. We'll talk about the implantation process then. Then we'll be talking about pregnancy and the embryonic development. We will understand the placenta formation and its functions. Okay, we will identify major developmental milestones during the pregnancy. So within this, we'll talk about that how different organs, or you can say which organs are formed at the end of which month. So pregnancy is for 9 months. So we'll talk about how the organs are forming, which organ is forming first, and then how the organ systems are being formed. We will recognize critical periods of organ development. As I've told you, we'll talk about parturition and lactation. Within this topic, we'll talk about the hormonal control of labor and delivery. We'll talk about the milk production, mechanism of milk production, and we will understand the composition and benefits of the colostrum, which is mother's milk. First, okay, we'll be talking about the menstrual cycle. Then we'll talk about fertilization, implantation, pregnancy, embryonic development, and parturition and lactation. So let's start with this topic, menstrual cycle now. So how can you define menstrual cycle? Okay, so in there are various ways to define menstrual cycle. One of the ways is that the reproductive cycle in the female primates, for example, monkeys, apes, and human beings, this is called as the menstrual cycle. So basically, menstrual cycle is a reproductive cycle. The question can come from here. They can ask you, reproductive cycle in female primate, this is known as the menstrual cycle, and then you can give examples of the female primates. Now, the first menstruation begins at puberty and it is called as the menarche. So, menarche means onset of the menstrual cycle or beginning of the menstrual cycle. And this occurs at the puberty. So, at puberty, there are a lot of morphological changes, there are a lot of physiological changes, there are a lot of hormonal changes. There is development of secondary sexual characteristic, like there is development of the mammary gland. Then what happens? There is the onset of the menstrual cycle, which is known as the menarche. So you should remember this scientific term. Then in human females, menstruation is repeated at an average interval of about 28 to 29 days. So this is the average interval. Okay, this is around month only. Okay, month is for around 30 days. So the menstrual cycle, the average duration of menstrual cycle is 28 to 29 days, although it can vary. This is the average. Now, and the cycle of events starting from one menstruation till the next one, this is known as the menstrual cycle. Again, this is another definition of menstrual cycle. The cycle of events starting from one menstruation till the next one, this is known as the menstrual cycle. Now, one ovum is released during the middle of each menstrual cycle. Remember this again, question can come from here. How many ovums are released during each menstrual cycle? So answer will be 1. Only one ovum means one egg is released per menstrual cycle. Then again, they can ask how many eggs are released in a month in human female. So answer again will be one ovum. One egg is released, and release of the ovum, this is known as the ovulation. Another point here to note here is that the eggs are released in the middle of each menstrual cycle. So middle of each menstrual cycle means what? So in human females, if the menstrual cycle is for 28 days, then mid of menstrual cycle means 14 days. This is the middle of menstrual cycle. The ovulation will occur at around 14 days. Egg will be released, okay, at around 14 days of the menstrual cycle. Cycle starts with the menstruation phase. So let's talk about the phases of the menstrual cycle. The first phase is the menstrual phase in which bleeding occurs. Okay, so when menstrual flow occurs and duration of menstrual phase is 3 to 5 days. Okay, initially the bleeding will be more, then the bleeding will slowly, it will be less. Now the menstrual flow results due to breakdown of the endometrium. So endometrium becomes very thin and it breaks down. This is also known as the shedding of the endometrium. And because of the shedding of the endometrium, bleeding occurs. Or you can say a liquid comes out from the vagina, which is known as the menstrual flow. And this liquid consists of the tissues as well as the blood vessels, which are broken down. Okay, so question has come from this line here in NEET 2013. Okay, menstrual flow. Menstrual flow results due to, okay, breakdown of the endometrium lining. Now, menstruation occurs only if the released ovum is not fertilized. Okay, so menstrual cycle or bleeding will only occur if the ovum is not fertilized by the sperm. Because when the ovum is not fertilized, then the level of progesterone decreases. Okay, and the progesterone hormone, it maintains the endometrium thickness. Okay, if the endometrium is thick, then it will not break, it will not shed, and there will be no bleeding. But when the progesterone level is less, then the endometrium becomes very thin and it breaks, leading to bleeding. So menstruation only occurs if the resulting or if the released ovum is not fertilized. Now, lack of menstruation may be indicative of pregnancy. Okay, here, but this is not in all the cases. So lack of menstruation can also be because of the stress or poor health of the female, or if the female is taking certain drugs or medicines, long-term medicines, or if the female is taking some hormonal pills. Okay, clear? So what happens? Menstrual cycle is regulated by the hormones. So menstrual cycle can be affected by stress also during the due to poor health also. Because of these conditions, the hormonal imbalance occurs, and this can affect the menstrual cycle. Now, second phase is the follicular phase. So menstrual phase is followed by the follicular phase. Now, what happens in the follicular phase? In this phase, follicle development takes place. The primary follicle is formed, then secondary, then tertiary, and then finally, mature follicle, also known as Graafian follicle, is formed. So during follicular phase, what is happening? Primary follicle transform into the Graafian follicle. Now, during this phase, what happens? The primary follicles in the ovary, they grow to become fully mature Graafian follicle. And simultaneously, what is happening? The endometrium of the uterus regenerates through the proliferation. So endometrium regeneration also occurs during the follicular phase. Now, estrogen causes the regeneration of the endometrium. And this estrogen is released by these developing follicles. Okay, so you should remember these two things are happening during the follicular phase: development of follicles and regeneration of endometrium. Okay. Now, these changes in the ovary as well as in the uterus. Changes in the ovary means development of follicles, and change in the uterus means regeneration of endometrium. These are induced by changes in the level of pituitary and the ovarian hormones. So question has come from this line also in NEET 2018. So pituitary hormones, what are the pituitary hormones? This is FSH and LH. FSH and LH, they are involved in follicle development. Then ovarian hormones are estrogen, and another one is the progesterone. So estrogen causes the regeneration of the endometrium here. Clear? Estrogen and progesterone. Now, secretion of gonadotrophin. So LH and FSH, these are both gonadotrophins, and they are released by the anterior pituitary. So level of LH and FSH, both of these hormones, these are pituitary hormones. Level of these hormones increase gradually during the follicular phase, and these two hormones are involved in follicle development and stimulates follicular development as well as secretion of estrogens by the growing follicle. So these growing follicle, they produce estrogen. Estrogen is involved in endometrium regeneration. Again, question has come from this line in NEET 2016 and 2024 as well. Now, both LH and FSH attain a peak level in middle of the cycle. Remember this. Question can come from here. They can ask you which two hormones are at their peak level in the middle of the cycle just before ovulation. These are LH and FSH. Now, what is the reason that these two hormones are at maximum level just before ovulation? Okay. We'll talk about this also. So estrogen is involved here. When the estrogen level or estrogen concentration increases the threshold value, then it triggers the release of LH and FSH from the anterior pituitary, So as the estrogen is also increasing, this two hormones, LH and FSH, their concentration also increases, and their concentration is maximum during the or just before the mid of the menstrual cycle, or mid of the menstrual cycle. Yes. Now what happens? There is a rapid secretion of luteinizing hormone. Okay, this is known as the LH surge, a rapid secretion of the LH. This causes LH surge. Okay, so rapid secretion of LH leading to maximum level during the mid cycle, called the LH surge, induces rupture of the Graafian follicle. So LH will cause a rupture of the Graafian follicle, and Graafian follicle contains the secondary oocyte. Okay, and the secondary oocyte, or you can say ovum, is released, and this is known as the ovulation. So next phase is ovulation after follicular phase. Question has come from this in the NEET 2020. So the ovulation or ovulatory phase is followed by the luteal phase. So next phase is the luteal phase. Now what happens during luteal phase? The remaining parts of the Graafian follicle, they transform into corpus luteum. Thus the name luteal phase. Luteal phase, corpus luteum is formed. Question has come from here in NEET 2023. Okay. Then corpus luteum secretes large amount of progesterone. So corpus luteum acts as a endocrine gland. Okay, acts as a temporary endocrine gland, and it secretes large amount of hormone known as the progesterone. And progesterone is very important for maintaining the thickness of the endometrium. Okay, and thickness of the endometrium is maintained, and this kind of endometrium is very important for maintaining the pregnancy, because blastocysts will attach to the endometrium. So such an endometrium necessary for implantation means when the blastocyst gets attached to the endometrium should be thick at the time of implantation. So such an endometrium necessary for implantation of the fertilized ovum and other events of the pregnancy. Again, question has come from this line. Okay, major events of menstrual cycle are shown. Okay. Here you so there is a figure in your book, okay, that will show you the different phases of the menstrual cycle. Clear? So in these phases, you will see the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, and then you will see the ovulatory phase, and then you will see the luteal phase as well. Okay, let me show you that image as well. Okay, so here you can see the image of the menstrual cycle. So let's discuss this image now. So here we'll talk about the hormones also, progesterone and estrogen. I'll tell you the functions of the progesterone and estrogen as well as function of the FSH and LH. So here you can see there are different phases of the menstrual cycle. Okay, first is the menstruation phase, followed by follicular phase, then luteal phase, also known as secretory phase, and then in the middle you have the ovulatory phase, and then the next cycle begins. Now let's talk about the uterine events first. So initially in the menstrual phase, the endometrium is quite thin. It is thinnest during the menstrual phase. So question can come from here. In which phase the endometrium is thinnest? So answer will be menstruation phase. Okay. Then what happens? Slowly the endometrium starts regenerating in the follicular phase. Follicular phase, what is happening? Two things were happening. Regeneration of the endometrium. Regeneration of endometrium was because of the increase in the level of the estrogen. These estrogens are released by these developing follicles. These follicles are developing because of this follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, basically follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone is causing the development of these follicles. These are released by the anterior pituitary. And FSH and LH, these The release of these two hormones is controlled by another hormone from hypothalamus known as gonadotrophic releasing hormone. This hormone is released from the hypothalamus. Okay. And this is hypothalamic hormone, gonadotrophic releasing hormone. This causes the release of FSH and LH from the pituitary gland. So FSH and LH, these are gonadotrophics. Okay, so this is what is happening in the follicular phase, development of follicles and regeneration of the endometrium. Then what happens now? Estrogen level, you can say, it's very high now, just before ovulation. This estrogen is being released by these follicles, developing follicles. Now, when the estrogen concentration exceeds the threshold value, then it again stimulates the release of FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary. So the level of FSH and LH is also maximum here, just before ovulation. Then the ovulation occurs at around 14th day. So here you can see how ovulation is happening. Mature follicle, also known as Graafian follicle, this consists of the secondary oocyte now. Now there is a rapid increase in the LH, which is known as the LH surge. This LH causes the rupture of the Graafian follicle. Now you can see here the egg is being released. Secondary oocyte is being released here in the mid of the menstrual cycle. And LH, luteinizing hormone, triggered the rupture of the Graafian follicle. Then what happens next in the luteal phase? Remaining parts of the Graafian follicle, this gets converted into the corpus luteum. Okay. Now corpus luteum acts as a temporary endocrine gland and it secretes progesterone hormone. So the level of progesterone increases and level of progesterone is maximum during the luteal phase. Okay. Now progesterone is maximum. And what is the function of progesterone? Progesterone maintains the thickness of the endometrium. Okay. So you can use the word progesterone maintains the endometrium instead of endometrium repairs the progesterone repairs the endometrium. You should write progesterone maintains the endometrium. Okay. Clear? So here the progesterone level is very high. So because of this, the endometrium again is regenerates and become thick. It is causing the regeneration of the endometrium. So the endometrium is thickest in the luteal phase. Question can come from here. At which stage the endometrium is thickest? So answer will be luteal phase. Now what happens after in the luteal phase? FSH and LH concentration decreases because there is no use of FSH and LH. Now what is happening to corpus luteum? Corpus luteum, if there is no fertilization, corpus luteum degenerates. Here you can see corpus luteum is degenerating. This is regressing corpus luteum and it forms another structure known as corpus albicans. As the corpus luteum degenerates, the progesterone level decreases. Progesterone level decreases, endometrium again start becoming thin and the next cycle begins. Okay, so you should know about the uterine events. In this, we will talk about endometrium. You should know about the ovarian hormone level, estrogen, progesterone. Estrogen maximum level just before ovulation, progesterone maximum level in the luteal phase. Ovarian events, you will talk about in the ovarian events, you will talk about the development of the follicles and how the Graafian follicle gets ruptured and how the corpus luteum is formed. Then in the pituitary hormone, you will talk about the level of FSH and LH. Okay. So during pregnancy, all events of menstrual cycle stops. So there is no menstruation during the pregnancy. Why this happens? Because the progesterone level is very high. Progesterone levels are maintained, and if the progesterone level is maintained, then the endometrium will always be thick and there will be no shedding of the endometrium, so there will be no bleeding. What happens in the absence of the fertilization? Corpus luteum degenerates. When the corpus luteum degenerates, then what happens? Progesterone level decreases, endometrium become again thin, and there is the shedding of the endometrium leading to menstruation and a new cycle starts. Human being menstrual cycle ceases around 50 years of age, and that is termed as the menopause. So cessation of the menstrual cycle or stoppage of the menstrual cycle, this is known as the menopause. This occurs at around 50 years in human females. Now, cyclic menstruation is an indicator of normal reproductive phase and extent between menarche and the menopause. So, normal reproductive phase is between menarche and the menopause. Let's talk about fertilization and implantation now. So, fertilization is the fusion of the male and the female gametes. So, during copulation, or also known as coitus, semen is released by the penis into the vagina. This is known as insemination. So, after the gametes are formed, the gamete have to be transferred into the female genital tract. Then only the fertilization will occur. So, these gametes are transferred by the penis. Okay. So, semen is released by the penis into the female genital tract, okay, into the vagina, and this process is known as the insemination. So, sperms, they are motile. Then they are released into the vagina. Then they travel through the cervix. Okay, then they reach uterus, and then they finally reach the ampullary region of the fallopian tube where fertilization occurs. Okay, so if the egg is already present in the ampullary region of the fallopian tube, then the sperm can fertilize the egg. Now, the fusion of the sperm with the ovum, this is known as fertilization. During fertilization, a sperm comes in contact with the zona pellucida layer of the ovum. So, ovum has several layers. So, outer layer is known as corona radiata. Inner to corona radiata is zona pellucida. Then inner to zona pellucida is the plasma membrane. So, during fertilization, when sperm come in contact with the zona pellucida layer of the ovum, then there are some changes in the membrane of the ovum. And this blocks the entry of the additional sperms. It means only one sperm can fertilize the egg, and polyspermy is prevented. Okay, polyspermy is multiple sperm, they are fertilizing a single egg. So this is prevented now. The question has come from here also. So thus this ensures that only one sperm can fertilize an ovum. Here you can see this is ovum surrounded by a few sperms. Clear? This is the ovum. These are the layers of the ovum. These are the cells of the corona radiata. Okay. This is zona pellucida. This is perivitelline space, means space between the zona pellucida and the plasma membrane. Sperms are approaching this egg. When sperm come in contact with the zona pellucida of the ovum, then there are some changes in the membrane of the ovum, which prevents the additional sperm to enter into the ovum. And this prevents polyspermy. Now, what happens here? Okay. Secretion of the acrosome help the sperm enter into the cytoplasm of the ovum through the zona pellucida and the plasma membrane. So what is happening when we studied about the structure of the sperm? We talked about that there is an acrosome present on the anterior portion of the head. This acrosome consists of enzymes such as hyaluronidase and acrosin. These enzymes, they degrade the wall of the ovum and helps in the sperm penetration. It helps the sperm to penetrate into the cytoplasm of the egg. And when the sperm reaches the cytoplasm of the egg, then the nucleus of the sperm fuses with the nucleus of the egg. Okay. So secretion of the acrosomes help the sperm enter into the cytoplasm of the ovum through the zona pellucida and the plasma membrane. So these are the layers of the ovum, zona pellucida and the plasma membrane. This induces the completion of the meiotic division of the secondary oocyte. Now, secondary oocyte was also arrested at the metaphase 2 of the meiosis 2. Okay, remember this. Secondary oocyte, it is arrested in the metaphase 2 of the meiosis 2. And when does it completes its meiotic 2 division? When sperm come in contact with the secondary oocyte. Then secondary oocyte completes its division to form a large ovum and a second tiny polar body. Now the second meiotic division is also unequal, and this results in the formation of second polar body, which is tiny. It consists of less cytoplasm and a large haploid ovum, also known as the oocyte. Now, ovum consists of most of the cytoplasm of the secondary oocyte. Okay, because the ovum, after fertilization, this will form the embryo. So cytoplasm contains all the nutrients and the organelles. Okay, and these are required for the development of the early embryo. So that's why these divisions are unequal. The first meiotic division was also unequal. The second meiotic division is also unequal. Okay, now the ovum is finally formed. Now what happens? Soon the haploid nucleus of the sperm and that of the ovum fuse together to form a diploid zygote. Now chromosome pattern in human female is XX and XY. Males are XY, females are XX. Now the females, okay, the female gamete, the ovum, it will contain X chromosome only. Whereas the male, they produce two kinds of gametes because they are XY. So in males, two kinds of sperms are produced. Half of the sperm will have X chromosome, half of the sperm will have Y chromosome. Okay, so males are heterogametic. Heterogametic means they are producing two kinds of gametes. Okay, females are homogametic, means they are producing only one kind of gamete. All the gametes will have X chromosome. In males, two kinds of gametes are produced, or two kinds of sperms are produced. Half of the sperm will have X chromosome, half of the sperms will have Y chromosome. Okay, clear? These sperms, they are present in the semen, and semen consists of fructose, calcium. Okay, so this fructose provides nourishment to the sperm. Clear? So when we talked about the male accessory glands, so you can say the secretion of the male accessory glands, this forms seminal plasma. That is the major constituent of the semen. Semen consists of these fructose, calciums, okay, and as well as the sperms. And this fructose provides nourishment to the sperm as well. Now, after fusion of the male and the female gamete, the zygote would carry either XX or XY depending on whether the sperm carrying X or Y fertilize the ovum. So males, they are producing X and Y sperms. Half of the sperm will have X, half of the sperm will have Y. Females are producing eggs that have only X chromosome. So sperm having X chromosome, if it fuses with the egg, then this will develop into XX and this will develop into female. If sperm carrying the Y chromosome, this fuses with the egg, then this will develop into XY and this will develop into male. Okay, so zygote carrying XX will develop into female baby and XY will develop into male. Now what happens? Zygote is now formed. So zygote undergoes repeated mitotic divisions. Okay, these repeated mitotic divisions is known as the cleavage. Now the zygote was formed in the ampullary region because fertilization was taking place in the ampullary region. Now ampulla leads to isthmus. So next pass, so after ampulla, there is a region known as isthmus, which is part of the fallopian tube only. And this isthmus lead to the uterus. So now as the zygote is moving from the isthmus of the oviduct towards the uterus, now the zygote is moving towards the uterus, and as it is moving, it is undergoing cleavage, which means repeated meiotic divisions. And it forms 2, 4, 8, 16 daughter cells known as the blastomeres. Okay. So from one cell, two are formed. From 2, 4 are formed. From 4, 8 will be formed. So 2, 4, 8, 16 daughter cells are formed. And these daughter cells are known as the blastomeres. Now, embryo with 18 to 16 blastomeres, this is known as the morula. Okay, so what is morula? Embryo with 8 to 16 blastomeres. Now, morula continues to divide and transform into blastocyst as it moves further into the uterus. Now, blastocyst is formed. The blastomeres in the blastocyst. We're talking about the structure of the blastocyst now. Now, the blastomeres in the blastocyst are arranged into an outer layer called the trophoblast. Okay, and an inner group of cells attached to trophoblast called the inner cell mass. So this blastocyst have trophoblast and the inner cell mass. This trophoblast help in the attachment of the blastocyst to the endometrium, and it also helps in the absorption of nutrients, provide nutrients to the blastocyst. This inner cell mass will finally differentiate into embryo. Now, trophoblast layer then gets attached to the endometrium, and the inner cell mass differentiate into the embryo. After attachment, the uterine cell divides rapidly. After attachment of the blastocyst, the uterine cell divides rapidly and covers the blastocyst. As a result, blastocysts become embedded in the endometrium of the uterus, and this process is known as implantation. Okay, this is known as implantation and leads to pregnancy. So here you can see the eggs are released, the ovum released from the ovary. This egg is collected by the fimbriae present located in the infundibulum region of the fallopian tube. Then the egg will move to the ampullary region. Here the fertilization is taking place. Then after fertilization, zygote is formed. Then zygote undergoes cleavage to form morula and then blastula. And then blastula, from morula, blastocyst is formed, and this blastocyst gets attached to the uterine wall. Process is known as implantation. So here they have shown you this is the ovum. Then the ovum is being fertilized by the sperms. Then zygote is formed. Zygote undergoes meiotic division. So first 2 cells are formed, then 4 cells are formed, and then 16 to embryo containing 16 to 18 blastomeres. This is known as morula. Morula transform into blastocyst. This blastocyst get attached to the uterine wall. The blastocyst consists of the trophoblast, which is the outer layer, and the inner cell mass, which will differentiate into the embryo. Let's talk about pregnancy and embryonic development now. So after implantation, what is happening? Placenta development occurs. So there are some finger-like projections. They appear on the trophoblast, and this is known as the chorionic villi. And this chorionic villi is surrounded by the uterine tissue and the maternal blood. Now, chorionic villi and the uterine tissue becomes interdigitated with each other and jointly forms a structural and the functional unit between the developing embryo and the maternal body. And this is known as the placenta. So placenta is formed between the developing embryo and the maternal body. Placenta is made up of 2 tissues, fetal tissue as well as the maternal tissue. Okay. So here you can see this is the embryo. These are the placental villi, cavity of the uterus. This is umbilical cord. So umbilical cord connects the placenta with the embryo. Now the placenta, what is the function of the placenta? It supplies oxygen and the nutrients to the developing embryo, and it also removes carbon dioxide and excretory waste produced by the embryo. Embryo is living, it needs oxygen for metabolism, it requires nutrients for the growth. These are provided by the placenta. And as it is metabolizing, it will produce carbon dioxide and the nitrogenous waste as well. So these needs to be removed from the embryo because they can be toxic. So placenta plays a role here. Now placenta is connected to embryo through the umbilical cord, which helps in the transport of substances to and from the embryo. Placenta also acts as an endocrine tissue. Okay, so it also produces several hormones like human chorionic gonadotropin, human placental lactogen, estrogen, and progesterone as well. Question has come from here. Hormones produced by the placenta. Now, another hormone is released in the later phase of pregnancy. This hormone is known as relaxin. This is produced by the ovaries. Okay, clear? So, in the later phase of pregnancy, hormone called relaxin is also secreted by the ovary. Clear? During the formation of the corpus luteum. So, this relaxin is basically released by the corpus luteum in the ovary. Now, there are some hormones which are only released during the pregnancy. These hormones are HCG, HPL, and relaxin. Remember this. These are hormones released only during the pregnancy. And HCG, this is the, you can say, acts as a marker for pregnancy. So, if HCG is present, then you can say the woman is pregnant. What is the function of HCG? It maintains the corpus luteum and progesterone production. Corpus luteum secretes progesterone. If the progesterone level is maintained, if the progesterone level is high, then the endometrium will always be thick. And this is very necessary to maintain pregnancy. Now, HPL, it promotes maternal metabolism and fetal growth. And HPL also, you can say, promotes the mammary gland development. Okay. It also helps in milk production as well, although milk production is regulated by prolactin. Relaxin softens the cervix and pelvic ligaments for the delivery. So relaxin, as the name suggests, is relaxes the ligaments and the muscles in the pelvic region, and then it widens the cervix as well, and it prepares for the childbirth. So these are the role of these three hormones. You should remember this. In addition, during pregnancy, level of other hormones like estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, prolactin, thyroxine also increase several fold in the maternal blood. So cortisol it affects the metabolism. Thyroxine also affects metabolism. Prolactin is involved in, it stimulates the milk production. So prolactin stimulates the milk. Okay, now the metabolism of the mother also changes because the mother have to feed the baby also, and it has to feed herself also. So metabolism of the mother changes. Mother requires more energy. So metabolism of carbohydrate, proteins, fat, these changes because of the release of these hormones. So cortisol and thyroxine, these are basically involved in regulating metabolism. Prolactin in milk production. Now increased production of all these hormones. So these are the overall role of the hormones. So all of these hormones are essential for supporting the fetal growth, metabolic changes in the mother, and maintenance of the pregnancy. And immediately after implantation, the inner cell mass differentiate into an outer layer called the ectoderm and the inner layer known as the endoderm. So these are the germ layers which are formed. Okay, then a mesoderm appears between the ectoderm and the mesoderm. So first ectoderm is formed, then endoderm, and then mesoderm, which is the middle layer, forms between the ectoderm and the endoderm. So these three germ layers give rise to all the tissues and organs in the adults. So ectoderm give rise to nervous system, skin and epidermis, hair, nails, tooth, enamel, lens of the inner ear. Mesoderm give rise to muscles, bones, blood vessels, heart, kidney, gonad, dermis of skin, connective tissue. Then endoderm give rise to digestive tract, lining, respiratory tract, liver, pancreas, thyroid, bladder, lining. Inner cell mass, it consists of the stem cells. So these stem cells, they keep on dividing and they can differentiate to form any kind of tissues as well as organs. Now in human beings, after 1 month of pregnancy, the embryo's heart is formed now. Okay. Now we are talking about the different, you can say, stages of the embryo development. So at the end of the first month of the pregnancy, heart is formed. Okay, so first heart is formed. The question can come from here. Which organ is formed at the end of the first month of pregnancy? Heart is formed. The heart can, you can say, beat. It is a pumping organ. So the blood circulation starts. Blood circulation is very important for the transport of the oxygen and the nutrients and to carry away the excretory products as well. Now, first sign of growing fetus may be noticed by listening to the heart sound, because heart is beating now. So you can listen the heart sound. You can listen the heart sound carefully through the stethoscope now at the end of the first month. Now, by the end of the second month of pregnancy, the fetus limbs and digits are developed. Means the hands and the legs and the fingers, they develop at the end of the second month. Then by the end of the 12 weeks, means first trimester. So one trimester is for 12 weeks. So at the end of first trimester, most of the major organ systems, what are organ systems? Respiratory system, digestive system, circulatory system. So most of the major organ systems are formed. Clear? Now, the first movement of the fetus and appearance of hair on the head are usually observed during the 5th month. Again, question can come from here. During the 5th month, what happens? The movements of the fetus can be felt by the mother, and there is appearance of hair on the head as well. By the end of 24 weeks, which is this end of second trimester, the body is covered with fine hairs, eyelids separate, and eyelashes are formed. By the end of the 9 months of pregnancy, the fetus is fully developed and is ready for the delivery. At the end of the 9 months, the fetus is fully developed and it is ready for the delivery as well. Let's talk about parturition and lactation now. So the average duration of human pregnancy is about 9 months, means the gestation period is 9 months. So the fetus develops during these 9 months. A vigorous contraction of the uterus at the end of the pregnancy causes expulsion or delivery of the fetus. So there are vigorous contraction in the uterus. So basically, uterus or the uterine wall consists of 3 layers: perimetrium, myometrium, and endometrium. So myometrium is made up of smooth muscles, and there are contraction in the myometrium of the uterus. And these contractions helps in, or these contractions push the fetus. It pushes the fetus. It causes the expulsion or delivery of the fetus through the birth canal. The process of delivery of the fetus or childbirth, this is known as parturition. Okay, simple definition of parturition is childbirth or delivery of the fetus. Now, parturition, remember, it is a complex neuroendocrine mechanism. Means neuro means nervous system is involved, endocrine means hormones are involved. Now, let's talk about the fetal ejection reflex. This is very important. So here, what is happening here? Signals for the childbirth, for the parturition, originate from fully developed fetus and the placenta as well. And this induces mild uterine contractions called as the fetal ejection reflex. So initially the contractions are mild, and these are triggered due to signals from fully developed fetus and the placenta. Okay, remember, initially the contractions are mild. So these mild contractions triggers the release of oxytocin from the maternal pituitary. Now, oxytocin, remember, oxytocin is also known as the birth hormone. Why it is known as birth hormone? Because it you can say intensifies these contractions and help in the expulsion of the fetus. So oxytocin acts on the uterine muscles and causes stronger uterine contractions, which in turn stimulates further secretion of the oxytocin. Question has come from here. So now these mild contractions cause the release of the oxytocin from the maternal pituitary. Now oxytocin further intensifies these contractions. Then again, the strong contraction causes or triggers the release of oxytocin. Then again, oxytocin causes or intensifies these contractions. And then again, oxytocin release is stimulated by these contractions. So this is a positive feedback mechanism. Okay, one factor is causing the, you can say, increase in the other factor. The stimulatory reflex between the uterine contraction and the oxytocin secretion continues, resulting in stronger and stronger contractions. So you can see there is a stimulatory reflect between the uterine contractions and the oxytocin secretion. All right, clear? So you can see this is very important here. This is a positive feedback mechanism between uterine contraction and the oxytocin. There is a contraction in the uterus, and these contractions are causing oxytocin release. Okay, then oxytocin, which is released, again is causing uterine contraction. Then uterine contraction is again causing uterine, this oxytocin release. This leads to expulsion of the baby out of the uterus through the birth canal, and this is known as the parturition. Okay, clear? So this you can see, this is parturition. Okay, parturition is childbirth. Here, birth canal is made up of the vagina as well as the cervical canal. Now, the mammary glands of the female undergo differentiation during pregnancy and starts producing milk towards the end of the pregnancy by the process called as lactation. Okay, lactation is production of milk by the mammary gland. So mammary gland, they start differentiating during the pregnancy and they start producing milk after the childbirth. So this helps the mother in feeding the newborn as well. So this mother's milk, this is known as the colostrum. This colostrum is thick, yellowish liquid. And this colostrum consists of a lot of nutrients. It consists of vitamins also. Which vitamins? It consists of vitamin A, vitamin B12, and vitamin K as well. It consists of antibodies also. Which antibodies? It consists of IgA, immunoglobulin A. And these antibodies provide, you can say, it helps to develop resistance in the newborn babies. Okay, this is clear. Question has come from here in NEET 2024. Breastfeeding during the initial period of infant growth is recommended by the doctors for bringing up a healthy baby. So breastfeeding is recommended by the doctors, especially during the 6 months. Okay, so only breastfeeding. Okay, so they only suggest breastfeeding for the initial 6 months for the newborn, because this mother's milk is very nutritious. It consists of a lot of antibodies also, and the composition of the mother's milk also changes. Slowly, what happens? The mother's milk, or you can say the fat content in the mother's milk increases. It has high calories now. So the components of the mother's milk changes depending on the need of the baby. Okay, need of the newborn. So let's discuss some tips and tricks. So structure analogous to placenta in mammals is chorion. Analogous means functional similarities. Chorion forms the outermost layer of the fetal membranes and contributes to the formation of the placenta by facilitating the exchange of gases and nutrients between the mother and the fetus. Then there is a term capacitation. Remember, this is very important, capacitation. So what happens during capacitation? During capacitation, or what does capacitation means? Capacitation refers to physiological changes that sperm undergo in the female reproductive tract. So capacitation occurs in the female reproductive tract. Okay, first of all. And what happens during capacitation? There are physiological changes in the sperms. And due to these physiological changes, now the sperm can fertilize the egg. Clear? After capacitation, acrosome reaction occurs when the enzymes are released from the acrosome and they help in the penetration of the sperm into the egg and help in the fertilization. Placenta umbilical cord are rich source of the stem cells, so they contain stem cells which can divide continuously and give rise to any kind of tissues. And these cells can be stored and preserved through placenta banking. Okay, so these cells can be stored. They can be cryopreserved. They can be preserved in very less temperature. Now the mature oocytes adhere to wall of the follicle through a stalk, cumulus ophorus, formed by the granulosa cells. So again, this is very important. What is cumulus ophorus? So the oocytes, they are attached to the follicles through a stalk, and the name of the stalk is cumulus ophorus. And this cumulus ophorus is formed by the granulosa cells, also known as the follicular cells. Now here you can see in this diagram, hypothalamus releases a hormone, gonadotrophic releasing hormone. This hormone acts on the anterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary releases the hormones. Okay, these are the gonadotrophins, FSH and LH. LH. Okay, what does LH do? LH causes the breakdown of the Graafian follicle. So it helps in the ovulation. Clear? And FSH and LH both causes the follicular development as well. Okay, growing follicles secrete estrogen. Clear? And then what happens? The level of estrogen is maximum just before the ovulation. And what does estrogen do? When the estrogen reaches or increases the threshold value, then again it promotes the release of FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary. Okay, and LH surges also because of the increase in the level of the estrogen. Okay, here they have an increase at mid-cycle stimulate LH secretion. So estrogen causes LH surge also. LH also causes Graafian follicle to rupture, which causes ovulation. And the remnants of the Graafian follicle converts into corpus luteum. Corpus luteum secretes, mainly it secretes progesterone. It also secretes some amount of estrogen. Okay, clear? And this increase after ovulation inhibit FSH and LH secretion. So you can say estrogen and progesterone, this maintains the endometrium. This helps to maintain the pregnancy. Okay. And you can see the level of FSH and LH, it decreases after the ovulation. Why it decreases? Because this increase in the level of progesterone and estrogen, this negatively affects the release of FSH and LH. So progesterone and estrogen, they will inhibit the FSH and LH secretion. That's why the level of FSH and LH decreases after the ovulation. Okay, so this was the end of the session. I hope the session was quite knowledgeable for you. We'll meet you in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.